I recently posted a video about Ruby Franke and exploring the problematic dynamics in the 8 Passengers family. One of the things I didn't have time to get into in that video were the problematic ways both mental health and religion also seem to play a key role in the toxic dynamics that Ruby is now being held accountable for. You may have heard that Ruby Franke was arrested alongside a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt. Jodi is also facing 6 felony child abuse charges. Jodi has been a licensed clinical mental health counselor in Utah until 2005 and started an organization where Ruby was a partner of it, and it was called Connexions. Ruby Franke's husband has said that Ruby was brainwashed by Jodi. Now, when you hear the term brainwashed, what we're really talking about is coercive control, which is the kind of control that operates from the inside out. Essentially, someone's mind has been taken over by someone else, and their beliefs are used to control them from the inside out. Essentially, like your own thoughts and beliefs are now in line with the person trying to control you, and so without even reaching out to them, you will agree and think whatever way they want you to think. But when I review the Connexions content, it seems clear that both religious beliefs and mental health concepts were being used in a very damaging way. I've shared before that there's a lot of research to support the positive impact that religion can have on people. And we all know I'm pro mental health. I'm pro organizations and tools and resources that help us in our mental health. The problem is both mental health practitioners and religious leaders have an enormous amount of power in the lives of those who look to them. And these two areas are both ripe to be exploited to control and abuse those involved. So today I want us to look at some of the problematic footage of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt and break down how we can see that they're using mental health and religion to exploit and abuse. Using Connexions as an example, I want to talk through specific tactics or themes that we find in cultic or high control spaces that are damaging and abusive. Tactic number 1, cutting someone off from their own mind. The first thing that happens in a toxic group is that we're separated from our own instincts. In this case, both mental health concepts and religious beliefs were used to cut people off from their own bodily sensations. Toxic environments want to explain away our symptoms of resistance so that when we feel like we want to push back or we have some anxiety about a situation or whatever it is that's letting you know that what's going on isn't healthy, you have a narrative automatically that will explain that feeling or thought away. And this allows you to dismiss it as incorrect or false or us overreacting or whatever. A belief, in this case, mental health concepts and religious beliefs, are used to convince you to either ignore or repress your own warning system so that you can't even feel them. Or beliefs are used to convince you that you cannot trust those warning systems. So this means that when things are going wrong or things rub us the wrong way, we don't even need someone like Jodi to push us or correct us. The beliefs that we have been given will lead us to self-police ourselves, shaming ourselves for feeling whatever it is we naturally feel. This is common in toxic religious environments. Verses from the Bible can be used to convince or persuade you that you can't trust your own emotions or the perceptions that you're having because you're sinful. Even by having that feeling, you're sinning. In Connexions, the ideas that were used to separate people from their own adaptive warning systems seems to be a combination of religious and mental health concepts. Connexions really emphasize that you cannot trust your feelings or your perceptions. They are invalid. At best, irrelevant sources of information, and at worst, they're evil or sinful. Deceitful is actually a word they use to describe this a lot.
Every day, you and I have experiences. We have experiences even as we're sleeping. You don't get away from experiences. Last night, I had an experience where I was laying in bed. It was around 3 or 4 in the morning, and I heard, well, first I saw my bedroom light up. My room just lit up bright. I was like, who turned the lights on? So my perception immediately went to who turned the lights on. So I had an experience. The room went bright and I was dead asleep. After experience, so think of experience right here. After experience comes a perception. So a perception is an interpretation of what the experience was. Now I was in distortion because I was perceiving that someone came into the room and flipped the lights on. That was not the reality. So distortion is anytime I'm perceiving something that's not actually the truth. The truth. The truth was lightning. There was a lightning storm and my room lit up. So my perception was someone flipped the light on. My feelings went to blame. Like that's immediately where my feelings went to. Who turned the light on? And it wasn't a humble like, oh, I wonder who turned the light on at 3 a.m. It was, who turned the light on? And I was in distortion. My feelings of blame, my feelings of anger, my feelings of bitterness, my feelings of annoyance, those feelings were real. And those feelings were naturally following my perception. And they were in distortion. And when the thunder boomed about 1 second later, my perceptions immediately shifted to, oh, no one came in and turned the lights on. We have a lightning storm going on. So my perceptions changed and then my feelings changed immediately. I went from anger, resentment, bitterness, blaming, irritation to relief.
It is true that we have perceptions about experiences. Understanding these perceptions and navigating them is a huge part of most mental health practices. The difference with what you see here is that Ruby is shaming herself for having what I would call a natural perception. In reality, what she's experiencing is highly adaptive and part of what can keep us safe in times of distress. One issue that I have with Ruby's version of this is that there isn't a truth and then the perception, right? Those aren't separate things. Your feelings and perceptions are telling you the truth about what you're feeling, and they come from somewhere. Sometimes in mental health work, you do want to detangle or shift your narratives of perceptions, like what you're telling yourself about how you feel. We sometimes want to shift that or question that, but not always. And even when we want to work to shift our perceptions, we do not want to blame or shame ourselves for them. That's horribly abusive and harmful. Another issue that I have with this example Ruby gives is that it's essentially showing us our functioning brain, like it's working properly. Her response here is not something that needs to be fixed. When we hear a potential threat, lights go on, right? Our bodies organize and mobilize us to respond without even looping in our conscious brain and the narratives that come along with it. Because when a threat is coming, we don't really have time to think about it. We just have to be ready to stay safe. That's like our fight, flight, freeze, right? We act automatically. And then, as her conscious brain gathers more information, right, she realizes, oh, it's a thunderstorm. It helps her relax. But can you hear what she's doing here? She's training people not to trust their automatic responses. At its baseline, she's saying when your body's telling you something's unsafe, do not believe it. Not only is it a neutral thing, but she actually uses the word distortion, which has a negative context. So she's taking something that's neutral, that happens naturally, and she's turning it into something bad. She's saying one thing is true and one thing is not. Instead of my body responded appropriately and sent a warning to me, I assessed, I got more information, I'm okay. That's a normal process. And her explanation of this is super problematic. Our feelings and our perceptions give us information about the world around us. They are one source of true information. Information about how a situation is making us feel. Sometimes they have to be course corrected with more conscious information, like Ruby's thunderstorm example, but sometimes they have more information than our conscious brains. And they're the only ones that are telling us the truth. Like when a car is coming at you, you just jump out of the way without even really thinking about it, right? You don't take a minute to, hey, is my perception of this dangerous situation? You'd be hit already. It protects us. It exists for a reason. This brings me to the second tactic that's used to control people, and it's what we call loaded language. And it's a huge theme in coercively controlling environments.
We have been doing a series around tactics of deception. In order for you to see truth, you're going to need to know the opposition. Anytime you go into battle, you need to know the enemy. And distortion is the enemy of truth. And so we're living in a world right now.
In those 20 seconds, what language was used? Let's watch again. I want you to notice every time you hear a word that feels like it's loaded.
We have been doing a series around tactics of deception. In order for you to see truth, you're going to need to know the opposition. Anytime you go into battle, you need to know the enemy. And distortion is the enemy of truth.
Deception, truth, opposition, battle, enemy. Did you notice that? Each of these words is very loaded. It carries a lot of meaning and a sense of danger. This is where the religious part is involved too. Can you hear those epic words that have a religious connotation? Which brings me to my third tactic: spiritualizing or moralizing mental health or normal behaviors. Moralizing or spiritualizing normal behaviors is a tactic that helps us with that sense of brainwashing. It helps us self-police ourselves when our normal reactions become areas of shame or conviction. Then we make it really hard to function in health as a human. You see Ruby do this even with her kids. Their normal behaviors become considered deceitful or manipulative. This removes the ability to have compassion for the child. And if you're the child, it removes your ability to have compassion for yourself. It also makes it really hard to reach out for help and support when you're always worried that what you're doing is something to be ashamed of, something that proves that you're sinning or you're bad. Some of us grew up in controlling religious environments, and now we either try to resist certain sensations or we can feel enormous shame about these things. We can feel like there is something broken with us, even though we're having a normal human experience. In Connections, things like a kid resisting bedtime, which I think we all did, they call this a tactic of deception, when I would call it a bid for connection. Kids will often want their parents to come in to spend more time with them, want to read another book, and want to read another book. They want more time with us. In this next clip, she talks about a woman who has asked a question about her child cussing. Listen to how Ruby addresses this.
So what the mom sees is very superficially. She sees that this child has a habit of swearing. And that might be the case, but what she's not seeing is the deeper issue, which is this child doesn't respect his mother. This mother is saying, don't swear, don't say cuss words. And the child's saying, I'm going to keep saying it. Do you see how swearing in and of itself is not the problem? It's the in your face, it's the entitlement, it's the I'm going to do what I want to do. This is going to infiltrate into other areas of your child's life. If he wants to do something, he's going to do it. If he wants to say something, he's going to say it. If he wants to take something, he's going to take it. And I don't know why she says, I'm a very open-minded person. I don't know what she means by that. It's like she's apologizing for wanting her 5-year-old not to be swearing. And so she's trying to control me. She's trying to control those who read this to not think badly of her. This is why your child doesn't respect you. How do you get your child to respect you? Paradoxically, you hold boundaries.
She says it's a symptom of a deeper issue. Essentially, swearing becomes this deep moral issue that is an indicator that her son's going to be a serial killer. And then in the second part, do you see how she moralizes the woman who asked the question? She says the woman who said, I have an open mind, was trying to be controlling and manipulative as well. I don't really understand that connection, but yeah. There's no space for just normalizing things that kids do or that people do. Everything is a deeper moral or spiritual issue. Tactic number 4, and this is a big one. The way that they use the concept of responsibility in Connections is really troubling to me. The mission statement of Connections is, and I quote, "We invite and encourage healing and facilitate personal growth through impeccable honesty, rigorous personal responsibility, and vulnerable humility." Rigorous personal responsibility. Now, if you've ever been to a mental health practitioner, it's likely that at some point you heard that you're not responsible for other people's feelings, but you are responsible for your own and your own actions. You've heard that, with the hope of inspiring you to feel agency in your own life, that you have options and you get to choose how you interact, right? You're responsible for managing your own healing and your own emotion regulation, and those around you are responsible for theirs. The problem is, more and more, this simple and meaningful concept is being distorted and used to harm.
Welcome to Connections. I'm Jodi Hildebrandt. So glad you're with us. If you're like me, you've had pain in your life. It could be from a divorce, work conflicts, relationship issues with children, grandchildren, spouse, anxiety, depression, or fear that you don't understand, feelings that you're not enough or that you're unlovable. Connections is the solution. You can change. You can experience feelings of being whole, centered, liberated, connected, empowered, and free. Come and see for yourself. There's something here for you.
There is a healthy sense of, I'm responsible for my own behaviors and reactions. And this is a really powerful truth for people who are codependent or have been trained to believe that it's their job to manage other people's emotions. Do you see how this could be leveraged to abuse or control? You abuse me. I experience trauma. But now the trauma is happening because of me, not because of what you did. Like, I'm responsible for my trauma experience. It's so similar to what we heard in Nexum. I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but it was a cult that Allison Make was involved in, and one of their cornerstones was this concept of being at cause. On the surface, it's restoring power back to you, helping you notice what you can control. But when it's applied in the wrong situation, it allows and sometimes even supports perpetrators to abuse us. Here's the problem. Sometimes we are a victim. For example, we're not responsible for the pain that we feel when someone stabs us with a knife. These things are nuanced. So let's wrap this up with some questions that you can consider. If this is kind of confusing, you can at least ask yourself some of these questions about the mental health practices or religious cultures that you're involved in. Question number 1, who benefits? Is the principle applied to everyone? Or is it applied in a way that benefits the perpetrator? For example, one of the cornerstones of Connections is humility. And this humility was something that Ruby expected from her kids and Jodi expected from her clients, but that wasn't applied to them. In these types of spaces, let's say Fred has a problem with something someone said and thinks it was harmful. When Fred speaks up about this, right, because he has a problem with it, it's upsetting, his discomfort is reduced to his own dysfunction. He's not humble. He is living in distortion. Why does Fred have discomfort about what's going on? Answer, Fred is dysfunctional. See how that can get twisted? Now let's say a Jodi type has a problem with Fred. She sees him do something that she thinks is bad. What does it mean? Well, Jodi's in a position of power. Fred is bad. What does it mean that Jodi has discomfort with Fred? The answer is Fred, again, is dysfunctional. These principles are only applied to benefit those in power. Another question you can ask yourself, are the religious or mental health practitioners that you're working with increasing your competency or your dependency?
Let's say you get on the subway or you wake up and your child has poured milk all over the floor, or something goes on in your life and you're really triggered and you're not quite sure how to respond inside Principles of Truth.
Now let me pause it right there. What do you think Jodi is going to say next? What do you think her offering will be to help that person?
You come and you contact us through Volley and say, here's the situation. Here's what I just read into. I'm not quite sure how to engage in truth. I don't want to engage in distortion anymore. I've lived 10, 15, 30 years of distortion. I don't want to do that. Help me understand how to engage this in a truthful way, and also help me understand the distortion that's going on, because I don't want to go back to those old patterns. And I want to be able to see it so that I can recognize it in other circumstances, and then I can also teach it to other people. So 2 ways to engage with us. One is privately, and one is inside of a group setting.
Her solution? Come to me. She's saying, come here. She's increasing their dependence on her and her organization. If you have a therapist or mental health expert or religious leader that tells you that they have all the solutions that you need, and you just have to come to them and lean on them more and more and more, that's problematic, especially if they don't leave you feeling more and more resourced and competent. Then you might want to reevaluate, right? We shouldn't be so dependent on other people. Sure, they can offer us support and tools, but then the challenge and really the growth is to try to do it on our own and to know that we don't need them all the time, but we may from, every so often. We want to be in religious and mental health spaces that increase our sense of competency and ability to move towards our values without increasing dependency on some leader. Question number 3. What does power look like in the space you're dealing with? Every space we're part of can have power dynamics. And this is why therapists go to school to learn about ethics, right? Because we know that in a therapeutic relationship, there can be a lot of power. We can have a lot of power in that situation, so we learn how to be incredibly careful with it. Some therapists or religious leaders seem oblivious to the power that they have, or they love the power that they have. So if you sense either of those things, you may want to take your time going through these questions. Consider those first few tactics that I mentioned and see what you find. When navigating the intersection of mental health and religion, it's all about finding a balance that promotes overall well-being. Have healthy boundaries. Understand that your faith should uplift and empower you, not control you. No one person or organization should have absolute power to tell you what's right or wrong or what you should value. Setting healthy boundaries is essential. Have an open dialogue. If you think your therapist or religious leader might be controlling, ask them some questions about it. You could ask things like, hey, I didn't really feel comfortable. I felt kind of pressured to do that. I would rather try this other thing. See how they respond. If they respond badly to you asking questions, let that be a good indicator that that relationship or space may not be healthy. While religion and mental health professionals can be a source of strength and comfort, it's equally important to recognize when they might be contributing to mental health concerns. There is so much about this family and the unhealthy dynamics and the way religion and mental health components were used to abuse people. So if you think I left something out, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. I'm happy to keep talking about this if you want, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next time.